billion. Japan this week offered its $9 billion, and Kuwait has now pledged its $13.5 billion.
We believe this is a small and insignificant contribution to the contribution that our friends in the United States have made, not just in financial, but in human resources.
Kuwait's contribution leaves roughly another $13.5 billion to come from Saudi Arabia, other Gulf states, and other nations. Administration officials say neither the $45 billion estimate nor the country-by-country breakdown is correct. But the president and his aides steadfastly refuse to disclose the estimates they've reportedly given to other nations.
That is still being computed. The burden sharing, which is very, very important, is coming along pretty well. And Congress is very interested in this. And of course, I'm very interested in it. So we'll be presenting that along with the cost figures to the Congress. But I can't give you the specific figures.
The costs of this war will be with us long after the shooting has stopped. We ought to know what they are, and we ought to know who is helping to defray them.
The only government official who has publicly estimated the cost of the war is Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, who is not a part of the Bush administration.
Probably, I would say, at this stage, under $500 million a day.
Details of the Gulf War price tag probably won't be known until after next week, when President Bush delivers his State of the Union message. The administration puts the final touches on its federal budget, and other countries announce still more contributions. Ralph Beglathurst.
Came 2 hours ago. Saudi officials say Patriot air defense missiles destroyed one Scud and apparently intercepted another quite close to the ground, scattering debris. Hours earlier, Iraq aimed its missiles at the Saudi capital of Riyadh, and again, Patriots were fired to intercept. One Scud, or the debris from an interception, demolished the wing of a government building. The Saudi press agency says flying debris killed one person and hurt 30 others. The latest 2 attacks bring to 26 the number of Iraqi Scuds fired into Saudi Arabia. 7 Scuds were fired at central and northern Israel today. Israeli and American reports say U.S.-supplied Patriot missiles shot down 5 of them and damaged the others. Still, 1 person was killed, 69 were injured. Hundreds of rescuers searched the rubble for survivors. Officials say all the Scuds were armed with conventional warheads. Israel says it will continue to show restraint after this, the 5th Scud missile attack. Germany may send some of its Patriot missiles to Israel. German TV says Foreign Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher made the offer as he wrapped up his visit to Jerusalem today. Environmentalists warned a Gulf War could be an ecological disaster, and apparently that's happening. American and Saudi officials say Iraqi sabotage at Kuwait's main loading pier has dumped millions of gallons of crude oil into the waters of the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon says the spill probably will amount to more than a dozen times the Exxon Valdez disaster off Alaska. Some believe Iraq may try to light the slick on fire or use it for some other military strategy. We get more from Peter Sharp.
Looking across enemy lines into occupied Kuwait this morning, smoke from the Al Wafra oil field set alight by the Iraqis clouds the horizon. Oil analysts and scientists believe that setting fire to the Kuwait fields and storage facilities could bring environmental catastrophe to the region. But it's already happening. It was the cormorant stumbling across the highway near the beach that signaled something was wrong. And behind the sand dunes, we discovered an environmentalist nightmare. This was the beach at Al-Hafji near the Kuwait border. The first victims of the disaster struggling to free themselves from its grip. The oil from ruptured coastal storage tanks near Kuwait City had been pouring into the Gulf for less than 36 hours. At sunset, a combination of wind and current continued to push the oil steadily south and out into the Gulf towards eastern Arabia. This morning, it looked as though the sea had turned to treacle. It even sounded different. Kuwaiti oil gurgling ashore along miles of coastline. The slick, according to the Americans, was 8 to 10 miles long and 2 miles wide. The cormorants that had survived the night were this morning dreadfully weakened. Neither side is admitting responsibility for this disaster, but these scenes will be repeated in the days and weeks ahead as the tide of oil flows south. No one should be surprised at this. It's exactly what environmentalists said would happen if war broke out. Even in peacetime, with all the resources available, it would take months to clear just this stretch of coast. With a war raging just a few miles from here, there is quite simply nothing to be done. Pollution like this now threatens the entire Persian Gulf. Although they've still to count the human cost of this conflict, it's clear the region's environment has already become a major casualty of this war. Peter Sharp, ITN, on the border with Kuwait.
To military doctrine of any kind. At a news conference before he headed off to Camp David today, the president seemed clearly angry at Saddam Hussein. He called Baghdad's display of POWs outrageous, horrible, despicable. He declared the Iraqi leader will be brought to justice, but he rejected speculation that Allied forces are aiming their bombs at him.
We're not in the business of targeting Saddam Hussein. I've set out our goals, and I think that I will say this, as I said the other day, in echoing my support for what Prime Minister Major of the United Kingdom said, no one will weep when he's gone. But having said that, we have spelled out our objectives, and I will stay with them.
Kuwait is contributing more money toward... The Pentagon says Allied air forces have been their busiest yet in the past 24 hours. Lieutenant General Thomas Kelly says clear weather allowed more than 2,700 flying missions. Asked about Iraqi video showing bombed civilian areas, Kelly noted there were a munitions depot, chemical weapons facility, and military communications center nearby. Spokesman gave a grim picture of Iraqi POWs. Marine Major General Robert Johnston says many of the captured soldiers were covered with lice and open sores. He said they had been getting only one meal a day before they were captured. Johnston says they are being treated well now, in sharp contrast to the way American POWs apparently are being treated.
The International Committee for the Red Cross has already visited the POWs that we had that were wounded about, I think it was on the 18th, and are in hospitals being taken care of medically, that the ICRC has visited them, and I will allow them to report, but certainly attribute to them words that appear to be very satisfied they're being well treated.
Iraq says it will stop broadcasting interviews with Allied prisoners of war until further notice. Earlier today, Baghdad radio aired what it says are statements from 4 captured Allied airmen. Coalition members have condemned the interviews as violations of the Geneva Conventions. Plane for plane, Britain's Air Force has suffered some of the greatest losses. That's because its Tornado warplanes have been flying some of the most hazardous missions. ITN's Mark Austin reports.
No Allied plane is coming under more scrutiny than the Tornado GR-1 ground attack aircraft. From the first night of the war, RAF crews have flown dangerous, low-flying missions into Iraq. The losses have been much publicized, but today an RAF commander defended the plane and the men who fly it.
I'm getting quite sick of people talking about the Tornado mission failure, and I unfortunately heard a very brief clip from a retired United States Air Force general by the name of Perry, who said he was disappointed by the very poor performance of the Royal Air Force. That sort of language, I'm afraid, makes me as a commander in the field very disappointed that senior military officers should say things like that. The crews have still got every confidence in their aeroplane, and you've got to have that confidence in your aeroplane if you're going to fly it each and every night. And there is no doubt in their minds whatsoever.
Well, I feel exactly the same way about it. The crews out here, all of them from each squadron from Germany and the UK, feel exactly the same way. We're very confident in the aeroplane and very happy to be flying it out here.
But the relief Mike Toft and others show after every mission highlights the dangers they face. This is the JP-233 airfield destroying bomb the Tornadoes have been delivering. They cost nearly £1 million each and are exclusive to the RAF, a unique weapon which, for the moment at least, is being held in reserve.
RAF commanders say they'll always vary tactics to try and confuse the Iraqis.
The priority is to hit the target, but also now to minimize the risk to the tornadoes and to the crews that fly them. Mark Austin, ITN, with the RAF in the Gulf.